You are listening to part 78 of our series, 7 Medicines, The Wise Woman Way with Susun Weed at Time Monk Radio. Hello, Susun. Welcome back to Time Monk Radio.
Hi, Gemini. Always wonderful to be here with all of you. Wow, that was dramatic for me to close the door on the 6th medicine. More and more, I am so glad that I have the opportunity to turn people on to the simple, safe, and effective herbal medicines that can help them not have to use so many drugs or sometimes any drugs at all. But as we said last week, sometimes there is a need for drugs, and sometimes there's a need for something even more dangerous or stronger, and that is what I call high-tech medicine. We remember that in my books, I don't call them medicines, I call them steps, and they start with step 0, do nothing, and then step 1, collect information, step 2, engage the energy, step 3, nourish and tonify, step 4, stimulate and sedate, step 5, use drugs, and step 6, break and enter. So here we are at our last river, the most dangerous river, the river where simply by its very nature, it is clear that anytime we engage in the 7th river, we are going to come to harm. Now that harm may be brief and mild. We think of a blood draw as something very, very simple and certainly not something to worry about, and yet it is clearly the 7th medicine, because each medicine, as we recall, has been moving deeper and deeper and deeper into the body. Serenity medicine, there is no touch, there's nobody else, it's just us. And then at story medicine, there's another person, so that our thoughts are being influenced by another person, but there is no touch. At mind medicine, there is still very little touch, and the touch there is quite light. When we get to lifestyle medicine, there is touch, and I often describe that touch as a hug. It's a warm touch, it's a comfortable touch. It's a touch that makes us feel good. As we move into alternative medicine, the touch may be massage. It may be deep tissue work. It's getting deeper. We're moving deeper into the body. We may insert a hair-fine acupuncture needle. And certainly there have been a lot of discussions. Well, isn't acupuncture engaging the energy? Isn't it just working with the energy? I say yes, yes, yes. But it's not hands off. We're actually invading. We're going through the skin. I say put it in to the 7th medicine. And people say, oh, but nobody's ever been killed by acupuncture. And I say, well, that's right. And so we've agreed that it can go in with alternative medicine, a place where it's very comfortable. And that very fine needle, so long as we know, so far as we know, has never harmed or killed anyone. When we go to pharmaceutical medicine, we are going more deeply into the body, but not that much more deeply, because we are simply swallowing things or taking things by injection. And it's at this point that we start to see the harm, and this is the break and enter part of the 7th medicine, that we are actually breaking a barrier. Breaking a barrier is, to me, a very interesting concept. And I think it explains a lot about what's going on in the 7th river. Sometimes breaking the barrier breaks down the barrier to health. Sometimes breaking the barrier frees up what is stuck. Sometimes breaking the barrier gives us an opportunity to change things dramatically. But where is that barrier? How do we distinguish where the barrier is? Well, the body gives us very clear clues as to where the barrier is. The skin is obviously a barrier. So anytime anything penetrates the skin, whether it's radiation or a needle or a scalpel, then we know that we have broken and entered. Other boundaries in the body are perhaps a little more ambiguous. Is the teeth a boundary? Certainly not. We put things in our mouths all of the time, from food to fingers and other things as well. However, if you put your fingers in your mouth and you continue letting your fingers carry on, sliding over your tongue and back to the back of your throat, you will discover the barrier as you gag. There is a gag reflex at the barrier. So the body has boundaries at its boundaries. It has barriers at its barriers. And generally, those are clear to us. The anus, for instance, has not one but two sphincters, saying this is a boundary, so that both enemas and colonics are break and enter techniques. They are part of high-tech medicine, even though they're not very technical or very high. I was talking with a group of midwives and the husband of one of them in the back of a pickup truck on a farm. I had spent the day there, and we were on the truck because we were spending a day with the trees, and they had wanted to go up to this special tree, which is too far to walk to. And since it was just on the farm and we were going very, very slow on dirt roads, we were hanging out in the back of the truck, and I think there were 8 or 9 of us and one of the husbands, and we were talking about exactly this issue. Where's the boundary? Where's the physical boundary of the body? And we got to talking about where's the boundary in terms of a woman's reproductive and genitalia. Is the boundary at the introitus to the vagina? And we generally agreed that there was a psychic or an emotional barrier there, but that it was a barrier that women could open, and that so long as a woman had willingly opened that body, then damage was not going to be done. But that there was a barrier at the cervix, which even if a woman said, oh, yes, I want to open my cervix, that damage would be done, even if that were possible, which it is not. In fact, we got to joking about, what kinds of things could be put into the vagina and whether or not they should be sterile. And when one of the midwives said that everything that goes in the vagina should first be autoclaved, which is to be treated with very hot steam, the man in question jumped out of the pickup truck and said, I'm not sure it's safe for me and my reproductive organs with all of you women. If you've ever been in a country south of the border, you know that the friend barrier and the space between people barrier is very different in the northern latitudes and the southern latitudes. Most places in North America, it would be a little bit unusual to see a couple of men or a couple of women, or even a couple for that matter, walking with their arms around each other's waists. And yet, throughout Central and South America, that is quite a common sight. When you stand and talk to someone in the Northern Hemisphere, you leave a certain amount of space between you. It's the amount of space that you can pretty easily see someone. However, if you're south of that border, you're going to find that people want to be closer together. As a matter of fact, I've seen some pretty funny conversations between the northerner and the southerner, where the northerner is stepping back, trying to maintain that distance between themselves and the other person, and the southerner is stepping forward, trying to get that distance closed up. So breaking barriers is not just about physical barriers. It's also about emotional barriers, psychic barriers, and spiritual barriers. And again, we have the seventh medicine because sometimes we need these. One of the aspects of the seventh medicine is the use of psychoactive plants. one of my students was blessed to be part of an experimental group. She had what was considered a terminal condition. It was not, in fact, terminal, but it was considered a terminal condition. And she was part of a group of people who were experimentally given psilocybin to come to terms with their terminal conditions. And she said, and most of the other people in the program said, that taking the psilocybin really broke their thought patterns. It broke down the habitual ways that they thought about life and death. And it gave them new ways, new spiritual understandings. As a matter of fact, as I said, she did far outlive her diagnosis, and 10 years afterwards, she said, I certainly wish that they would run another study because I'm starting to forget and to get back into my old habitual mindset. I need to have that broken down again so that I can see that we're all one and that death is just a kind of transformation. I made a list of some techniques that are used in the seventh medicine. It's certainly not a complete list, but it'll give us some idea of the kind of techniques that we are talking about. I already mentioned enemas and colonics, self-induced vomiting, rolfing, and deep tissue massage. Also, of course, ultrasound and sonograms, drilling, teeth, root canals, and tooth extractions, blood draws, injections, IVs, epidurals, transfusions, liposuction, collagen injections, lumbar punctures, bone marrow transplants, piercings, tattoos, stitches, cutting, screwing, pinning, artificial joints, transplants, x-rays, mammograms, angiograms, CT scans, shaving, dermabrasion, chemical peels, laser surgery, facelifts, rhinoplasty, catheterizations, conization, cauterization, chirosurgery. Domestic violence, including invasion of one's personal space, threats and verbal abuse, breaking of a child's will, physical violence and rape. Electroshock treatments, episiotomies, circumcisions, biopsies, lumpectomies, mastectomies, hysterectomies, tonsillectomies, appendectomies, vasectomies, prostatectomies, DNC, abortion, transplants, replacements, reattachments, bypasses, amputations, implantations, tumor removals, cataract removals, bunion removals, sigmoidoscopy, arthroscopy, laparoscopy, bronchoscopy, coloscopy, radiation treatments, including ingestion of radioactive materials, MRIs, and PETs. We see why high-tech medicine is one of the names for this, because there is a lot of high-tech here. In the coming weeks, we will look more closely at some of these seventh medicine techniques, certainly not anywhere in the detail that we did with the things in the sixth medicine. In fact, primarily what I want to focus on are tests. You remember all the way back, weeks and weeks, months and months ago, where we were talking about story medicine, the second medicine. And I suggested that there was a game of chutes and ladders going on, and that what many of us got to the second medicine, story medicine, when we were looking for someone else to tell us their story about what was happening to us, that suddenly we found ourselves on a chute, on the fast track down to the seventh medicine down to high-tech medicine, down to invasive tests, especially X-rays, CAT scans, sonograms, and ultrasounds. So in the coming weeks, we are going to be looking at those tests, both screening tests and diagnostic tests, and seeing which of those tests we can do without, which of those tests that we can replace with tests that we can do ourselves for self-care, what the dangers of those tests are, and how we can protect ourselves against those dangers. More and more as high-tech diagnosis becomes the norm, we become less and less aware of the real dangers of what is going on with them. And although I certainly knew that CT scans were dangerous, I did not realize that researchers are saying that 2% of all future cancers, that's about 29,000 yearly new cases and 15,000 yearly new deaths, are going to be created by the CT scans, the 80 million CT scans that are currently being done in the United States. When we're at the seventh medicine, harm is being done. There is simply no way around it. That harm may not be visible at the time. It may take years to manifest itself. The cancers caused by the radiation from CT scans can occur within 10 years, or it can take up to 30 years for them to express themselves, in the same way that we can see that some of the hormonal drugs that we gave to pregnant women are showing up not just in their children or their grandchildren, but even in their great-great-grandchildren. So we're going to be looking at these ways of diagnosing and asking ourselves, is this something that we really need? If we're being told that we need an X-ray or we need a CAT scan, how can we respond? And what can we do if we decide we are going to have that test to make sure that we're not one of those 29,000 people per year who are going to wind up with cancer from that? Also going to look at screening tests, many invasive screening tests, and how our ideas about those screening tests change from time to time. I'm old enough to remember free chest X-ray vans pulling up at the supermarket. You come out of the supermarket and there would be a free chest X-ray van there. Not only that, when I went to the shoe store, the man at the shoe store would X-ray my foot. We now are horrified to think that children had their feet X-rayed and that people of all ages had their chests X-rayed as a screening. And yet we still use X-rays for mammograms as a screening. We'll be talking about the effects of these things and what we can do instead. Meanwhile, high-tech medicine does have some interesting things to offer us. Here's a fun article from AARP and high-tech ways to help you stay healthy. Health apps. 20% of smartphone users are now relying on healthcare apps. They can remind you to take your medication. They can record vital signs, including blood sugar and blood pressure, and they can help you collect information on your symptoms. Med Coach, Food Ucate, On Track Diabetes are just a few of the thousands of healthcare apps available. However, there is a downside to them. A review of 4 apps in JAMA Dermatology found that 3 of them misdiagnosed melanoma, a potentially deadly form of skin cancer, at least a third of the time. So don't rely on your app any more than you'd rely on the internet to give you the good health advice all the time. How about electronic medical portals? Just log in to your provider's medical portal and you can view your lab and test results. No more waiting by the phone. You can manage your appointments, collect your electronic medical records. Hooray, no more waiting endlessly for that. Refill your prescriptions and even communicate with your physician. This is definitely the high-tech way to the future. So you're going to have to ask if your doctor is using a portal, and if so, how you can get connected to your doctor. Doctors, of course, are saying, test results, people don't know how to read the test results. We can read positive or negative. The nuances we can go over with our doctor. At-home monitoring for chronic conditions like diabetes, hypertension, asthma, and heart failure. 73% of the patients who are using at-home disease monitoring are satisfied with the program, and it was estimated that they saved about $815 in healthcare costs because they had fewer doctor and emergency room visits. But the devices that do this, the devices that can hook up to your smartphone and allow you to measure blood pressure or heart rate or blood sugar levels, they're expensive, and they're not covered by insurance. High-tech, indeed. Crowdsourcing. This one thrilled me because I have long been a fan of learning from others. You want to find out something? Ask the person who has been there. Sites like crowdmed.com and patientslikeme.com help you get in touch with experts to ID rare conditions and to listen to and communicate with people who have similar problems. You can find out what's going on with them, what's worked for them, what hasn't worked for them. I believe in the power of the spoken word and how wonderful to find story medicine here, all the way at the end of our medicines into our seventh medicine. Telestroke. If you suffer a stroke where a blood clot is blocking the flow to your brain, you can get a clot-busting drug and really reduce the severity of that stroke, but you can't do it until you receive a diagnosis, because if you don't have a clot, it's really going to mess things up. So the problem is, there you are, and for every minute that the stroke continues without treatment, you're losing 2 million brain cells, and where is the doctor who can do this? And so there is now an app available in hospitals nationwide called Telestroke, which can connect patients in ERs with neurologists who can do a video conference, access brain imaging scans, and say yes or no to that drug. That's high-tech medicine working for us. Fitness devices. You've heard me talk off and on Gemini about my Fitbit. I love my Fitbit, but I am very much motivated by numbers, so that I am the perfect user of such a fitness tracking device. Today I have been sitting here getting ready for this radio show and reading to my granddaughter in Costa Rica and doing other very sedate things. In fact, I've only taken 2,382 steps. And since my Fitbit is telling me that, then what's going to happen when I'm done with this radio show is I'm going to get up and I'm going to go for a walk. Now, it's not true that everybody is motivated by numbers. And in fact, since these fitness devices have been around, we actually have found that about a third of the people who get them use them for a while and then just put them away. But the rest of us are really enjoying them, and they are improving our physical fitness. And apparently there are great acceptance and use of these to be integrated in post-surgery rehab programs because they're really helping people stay on track with their rehabilitation, plus reminding them and measuring exactly how much they are doing. All right. Virtual doctors. I like this one too. You can't get an appointment or you're somewhere weird. How do you get to a doctor? Well, you can do an e-visit. I'm not telling you anything that ain't true. You can go to mdlive.com or doctorondemand.com or appmedicine.com. So mdlive.com, doctorondemand.com, and appmedicine.com, and they will connect you with a doctor or a nurse, often within minutes, and most of them are available 24/7. Certainly, there can be some problems there. It's not ongoing care. Yes, indeed. Perhaps the medical professional you're talking to feels that they can't just tell you to lay down in bed and rest, that they have to prescribe something. As is always the case, we have to take care of ourselves, even when we're taking care of ourselves. And the same kind of thing, but for emotional problems. Virtual counseling. virtualtherapyconnect.com and breakthrough.com are two online services that, like virtual doctors, are available almost all times of the day and the night. Again, it's not someone who's there for you and knows your individual case, but often that person who would like to be there for you is sound asleep, and you need and want to talk to somebody right away. That's where virtualtherapyconnect.com and breakthrough.com can be the high-tech way for you to connect to the health care that you need right now. The seventh medicine, high-tech medicine, break and enter. Break and enter is, as we've said, more than just surgery, more than just radioactive tests. Break and enter also has to do with breaking what's going on in our habitual thought patterns and entering new ways of relating to our bodies and to our illness. Story medicine does this, but story medicine does this in a quiet way and a way that is harmless. Psychoactive plants do this, but we admit there can be some problems associated with the taking of psychoactive plants. That's why in many cultures the use of these plants is put in the hands of special people called the shaman or the medicine person. And they will often use psychoactive plants to help them move toward a diagnosis. Next week, I'm going to come back and spend a week with you looking at the psychoactive plants that are available to us in the seventh medicine and the shamanic practices that are recommended if we are considering using psychoactive plants to break our minds open and to enter a new and healing message of oneness, of health, of wholeness and holiness. So I can hardly wait until next week when we get to come back and talk about all of these exciting things. Hey, Gemini?
I agree, Susan. Thank you.
You are welcome. Thank you all for joining me to restore herbal medicine as people's medicine. talk to you next week. Green blessings.
I look forward to it, Susan. Thank you. And this concludes part 78 of our series, The 7 Medicines, The Wise Woman Way, with Susun Weed at Time Monk Radio.